There is no limit to the number of standard duplex receptacles that can be installed on the load side of a ground fault circuit interrupter, or GFCI, receptacle, according to the National Electrical Code, or NEC. The NEC focuses on protecting people from electrical shock hazards, and the GFCI does exactly that by monitoring the current balance between the hot and neutral conductors. If there is an imbalance, indicating current leakage to ground, the GFCI trips, cutting off power to the circuit and preventing a potential shock. The number of receptacles on a circuit is determined by the circuit's amperage and the load each receptacle is expected to handle. The NEC specifies the maximum load allowed on a circuit, and that's what dictates how many receptacles can be installed. For example, on a typical 15 amp circuit using 14 American wire gauge wire, you're generally allowed to have up to 10 to 12 receptacles. This assumes a standard load per receptacle, which the NEC defines for general use. However, the actual number can be lower if you anticipate higher loads on any of the receptacles. With a 20 amp circuit using 12 American wire gauge wire, you can typically have up to 13 receptacles, again depending on the anticipated load. The NEC does not limit the number of receptacles based on whether the circuit is GFCI protected or not. The main considerations are the total load on the circuit, wire gauge, and breaker size. GFCI protection is applied to specific locations where shock hazards are more prevalent, such as bathrooms, kitchens, garages, and outdoor areas. This protection can be provided by a GFCI breaker or a GFCI receptacle. When using a GFCI receptacle, it protects all downstream receptacles connected to its load terminals. This means that all receptacles on that branch circuit after the GFCI receptacle are also GFCI protected. Remember to always consult the latest edition of the NEC and local electrical codes for the most accurate and up-to-date information. These codes can vary depending on your location and specific circumstances. It is also important to consider the total load connected to the circuit. Each receptacle is assumed to have a certain load, and the total load in the circuit should not exceed the capacity of the breaker and wiring. Overloading a circuit can cause the breaker to trip or, in more serious cases, lead to a fire. When determining the number of receptacles on a circuit, you should also consider the types of devices that will be plugged into those receptacles. If you anticipate using high-power devices, such as power tools or appliances, you may need to reduce the number of receptacles on the circuit to avoid overloading it. It is always a good idea to consult with a qualified electrician to determine the appropriate number of receptacles for your specific needs. An electrician can assess your electrical system and provide recommendations based on your load requirements and local codes. Furthermore, remember that the NEC has specific requirements for receptacle spacing in certain areas, such as kitchens. These requirements ensure the receptacles are conveniently located and that extension cords are not used unnecessarily. For example, in kitchens, receptacles must be installed along countertops so that no point along the countertop is more than 24 inches from a receptacle. In summary, while there is no specific limit to the number of duplex receptacles on the load side of a GFCI receptacle, the practical limit is determined by the circuit's amperage, wire gauge, anticipated load, and adherence to all applicable electrical codes and standards. Prioritize safety and consult with a qualified electrician when in doubt.